Can I ask you one kind of strangely capitalism-related question? I mean, you have arguably been one of the world's, well, you've definitely been one of the world's most successful capitalists of the past 25, 30, 40 years. Last week, I sat on a stage with Donald Trump, and he said that he wanted to introduce tariffs, 10, 20% on everywhere, and his argument was this was very good for American business. In your experience, does that make sense?
No, it's certainly not the case, and the difficulty of convincing voters that free trade is overwhelmingly to their benefit. It's unfortunate how difficult it is to make that case. And so, you know, I understand a politician who chooses to take advantage of that, but, you know, we will suffer overall. Welfare will improve less, as not only will, if the U.S. puts tariffs on, of course, other people will put tariffs on as well, and the economic dynamism, speed of innovation will be significantly slowed.
Just to push you on that dynamism point, you know, it's very easy to make the argument that this means higher prices for consumers, but this issue of dynamism, the sort of, you've been involved in entrepreneurship, these things most of your life. If you have less foreign competition, less foreign goods, that must have an impact on it. I know it's back to a creed you've believed in, but in practice, is that argument possible to make to voters?
Well, we should find articulate politicians who can make the case. If you take most of the industries I think about, like, you know, inventing a new drug or writing a new piece of software or birthing a new climate technology, you have these gigantic fixed costs. And the fact that you can do that work and then sell it on a global basis means that everybody's getting, you know, faster innovation and lower prices. And if you start to fragment markets because of either tariffs or regulatory barriers to that trade, it absolutely takes away the lower prices and high-speed innovation.
You mentioned health. It struck me, maybe this is unfair, but health is kind of the opposite to climate, is that at least there were incredible health gains in the early 2000s. It seems to have stalled a bit. What's needed to create another global health boom?
Well, I'm actually quite optimistic. You know, both the diseases in lower income countries and the diseases in rich countries, we are seeing incredible advances, whether it's obesity drugs, long-acting drugs. You know, gene editing is still super expensive, but the Gates Foundation is putting a lot of money into trying to get that from millions of dollars to hundreds of dollars, so we can take a disease like sickle cell that's prominent in Africa. And as we do that, it'll benefit all the world's health systems. And then, of course, you know, AI will be applied in health in the upstream discovery piece to speed up new drugs, but it'll also be applied in the downstream delivery, sitting in the sessions with doctors, helping with follow-up, helping with paperwork. And so I think the health sector will be an exemplar that AI can improve things quite dramatically.
There's one thing which is a little bit similar, is that issue, and you did it in your Netflix series, this issue of trust, is that there are these things that appear very logical to do with health, and yet people don't seem to believe it, COVID being the obvious example. How do we deal with this sort of deficit of trust when it comes to health? Is it just to do with a deficit of trust in governments, or is it broader than that?
Well, certainly I never expected, as the pandemic came along, that, you know, many people had warned about, the idea that people would reach for oversimplistic explanations, you know, like attacking either myself or Tony Fauci, or, you know, attacking the idea of vaccines. I wouldn't have expected that. And certainly a lot of people, particularly older people who should have been vaccinated, were not. So, you know, those rumors, you know, literally caused hundreds of thousands of deaths. I'm hopeful with that out of the way that we can go back to, a more scientific way of looking at health innovation. When people see the effects of things like these obesity drugs, it should remind them that, we can improve health pretty dramatically.
I agree. The obesity drugs are a very good example in one direction. On the other hand, you have stuff about, hurricanes and things like that. You still see that basic trust that people used to have in, quote unquote, scientists and government it's amazingly small compared with what it was 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, there's like these latest hurricanes, some people blame me for those too. I'm very busy. But hopefully, the basic decisions about what's safe and what's beneficial, we maintain that. And, I think positive progress will help get people back, looking at what experts are telling them the truth is.
One quick thing on health. The mosquito-borne diseases seem to be a little bit back on the rise. Dengue and the West Nile stuff, people. Are you worried about that? I mean, it just seems to be a slight blip in an otherwise very positive picture.
Yeah, of course, the biggest part of that, which is kind of invisible in middle income and rich countries, is the malaria burden, which is killing about 600,000 kids a year.
Yeah.
Where you are in Brazil, dengue's gone up somewhat. We do have new tools to reduce mosquito populations, one that's still in the lab called Gene Drive that the Gates Foundation funds and should help us with all those mosquito-borne diseases. What we see is when you get a lot of flooding, which you get a bit more of with climate change, mosquitoes really thrive. And so places like Pakistan where you had very little malaria, then when they had the flooding, now it's come back in a pretty big way. And so, that innovation pipeline is coming along. It should get even more money, but we will be able to get rid of those vector-borne diseases in countries that want to embrace these new tools.
I'll ask you one last question about Brazil. I mean, this is a place we've heard where, especially on the climate side, a very, very high proportion, probably higher than anywhere else, certainly above 90%, coming from renewable sources. Do you see Brazil as the center of this climate? It seems to be the center of both the pain in the Amazon, but also on the creative side. Is that something you've been following?
Well, certainly at the UN General Assembly, the Gates Foundation had our Goalkeepers event, and I gave an award to President Lula for the work they've done in reducing malnutrition. We've been talking with Brazil a lot about COP30 that's coming up, and that'll be a very important milestone both for climate mitigation and climate adaptation. Brazil has done some good pioneering things on mitigation. The deforestation, it's important that get under control both for Brazil itself and for the world. So there's a lot being learned there. As I said, one of our best breakthrough companies is building a steel plant with partners in Brazil. So yes, agriculture innovation with Embrapa, Brazil is very strong. So it's fantastic, that the issue is a very important issue, and it deals with kind of the equity things that Brazil's been a global leader on.
Just one last thing on that, particularly on Brazil. Are you now much more, it sounds like you're more optimistic about Brazil than maybe if you and I talked about it 20, 30 years ago. It's a more positive story?
Well, Brazil's got a lot of assets. And, it's kind of a mixed story because they've had, challenges with governance and, who knows, they're like the U.S. They have a party that's sort of against all climate things and for Amazon destruction, and you have a party who cares about that. So, I'm not an expert on what the balance will end up being over time. The whole world has this problem that we do need to invest. And Amazon forest destruction, we're very good at measuring it now because of satellite systems, but the exact policies that will get us there, still somewhat challenging, particularly as you get different parties in power.
Bill, thank you very much for talking to us again. Covered many, many subjects. Thank you very much on behalf of everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you.